last year was a magical year for the Minnesota Vikings. They went 13-4. They made the playoffs. Their first-year head coach, Kevin O'Connell, was a massive home run. And the question is, can Minnesota do it again? Well, one thing they did this offseason that I loved in Minnesota, they added a new defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, former Dolphins head coach who did a great job there, former coach in Pittsburgh. Now he's the defensive coordinator in Minnesota. Round of applause. That's a great hire and a great move. Now, the Vikings did lose a couple of guys who were big contributors. They lost defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson. He went to Cleveland, got a big contract. They lost wide receiver Adam Thielen. They tried to replace him with Jordan Addison, the first-round pick. Running back Dalvin Cook is gone. That's probably addition by subtraction. He was a big contract and wasn't as productive. They lost cornerback Patrick Peterson to Pittsburgh. They lost linebacker Eric Kendricks. They traded pass rusher Zadarius Smith. I have questions about their defense. However, their defense was terrible last year. So it's losing some defenders and trying to bring in new guys. Not the worst thing I've ever seen. They brought in a new corner, Byron Murphy, to replace Patrick Peterson. Now, the big question mark on the Vikings defense, in my opinion, is Marcus Davenport. He's a pass rusher. He is supposed to help them get after the quarterback. He was brought in from New Orleans. Marcus Peters is a former first-round pick who's 26 years old, very young for a guy who's been in he's been in the league for 5 years somehow. But unfortunately, in 5 years in the NFL, and he's missed some games due to injury, but playing 11, 15 games a year, it's really sad that his sack numbers only got 21 and a half sacks in 5 years in the league. That's not great. I thought in 2021 he showed potential, but that's 2 years ago. And Marcus Davenport's a big question mark. Can he really make their pass rush better in Minnesota? I'm not sure. However, they weren't great last year. I'm really curious how Brian Flores can help the defense in Minnesota, because Minnesota last year was ranked at the very bottom of all of the defensive categories, almost all of them. It's ridiculous. Last year, their defense in Minnesota was terrible. And also last year, the Vikings went 13-4. To go 13-4 with a bad defense, pretty impressive. Says a lot about their offense. This year, and Vikings fans, hear me out. Please don't kill me. Listen to what I have to say, then give me feedback. But Vikings fans, I have the Vikings going 9-8 this fall. A couple things went really, really well for Minnesota last year. They stayed relatively healthy. They were 11-0 in regular season games that were one score. So to win basically every one-score game you play in, that's shockingly rare and doesn't happen very often. And they had a couple insane wins. They beat Buffalo in overtime in this crazy game where they converted a 4th and 18 to Justin Jefferson. Minnesota had the biggest comeback in NFL history against the Colts. That's probably not going to happen again this year. So I expect Minnesota to take a step backward. I think they overachieved last year. It was great. It was fun. It was magical is the word. But this year, Minnesota's got a really tough schedule. I have them starting 3-3 and then kind of hovering all year around 500, finishing ultimately 9-8. I'm not hating on the Vikings. I don't have any disrespect for them. But we have to acknowledge how well things went for them last year and how unlikely it is that happens again this fall. Plus, last year, the Lions weren't as good. And, I think a lot of the teams around them are better. Plus, the Vikings winning their division, making a playoff game means they're going to play a tougher schedule. So I feel comfortable saying the Vikings are going to take a step backward this year. And that sucks. I like Kirk Cousins. I like their coach, Kevin O'Connell. But, the big question mark, how big of an impact can Brian Flores have on that defense? If Brian Flores comes out and top to bottom turns around that defense entirely, that could make this prediction very, very wrong. So keep your eye on that. And one player to watch, it's worth noting this, in Minnesota, they've got a second-year safety, Louis Cine, who he was a first-round pick in 2022. They need him this fall. He broke his leg week 4 last year, so he never really got a chance to play at all last year. Keep your eye on their second-year safety in Minnesota.